Lesson 26: Manipulating the DOM with refs. 1. Introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are exploring how to use references, refs, in a component-based UI library in order to access and sometimes manipulate elements of the rendered document. Although the framework takes care of updating the display for us, there are situations when we need a direct link to a rendered node, perhaps to focus it, scroll through it, measure it, or otherwise interact with the underlying element. In this lesson we will learn when, why and how to use refs thoughtfully. 2. Getting a ref to the node. First, we'll cover how you obtain a ref to a node. The idea is that you declare a special reference object in your component logic, and you instruct the UI library to attach that reference to a particular rendered element. Once the element is mounted in the document, the reference object will hold the DOM node. From there you can access the node in event handlers or later logic, and you can call standard browser APIs on it. For example, you might call focus, scroll into view, measure the size or position, and so on. 3. Example: focusing a text input. In a common use case, you might present an input field and a button. When the user clicks the button, the code behind the scenes references the inputs node and triggers focus on it. This gives the user a smoother interactive experience. You declare the ref, assign it to the input element, and then use the reference inside the handler to call the focus method on the node. 4. Example: scrolling to an element. Another frequent scenario: you have a set of rendered items, for instance images or sections, and you want to scroll to a particular item when the user clicks something. You assign a ref to each of those items, and then when the user clicks a control you invoke scroll into view, or similar, on that node. This allows the UI to jump directly to the desired element, giving user control and interactivity beyond the standard rendering flow. 5. Accessing another component's DOM nodes. Sometimes the ref you create lives in a parent component, but the actual DOM node resides inside a child component. In that case, you pass the ref from the parent into the child, and the child applies it to its rendered element so that ultimately the parent holds the reference to the DOM node. This allows a parent to trigger focus or scroll on a child's input or other element, enabling coordinated interaction across component boundaries. 6. When the library attaches refs. It's important to understand the lifecycle. When you ask the library to render and commit changes to the document, the ref values are assigned during the commit phase. That means during the render phase the nodes may not yet exist, and the reference object's value may be null. If you attempt to access the node too early, during rendering rather than in response to an event or after commit, you risk working with a null reference or an outdated node. Therefore, you typically access refs inside event handlers or in effect hooks, if your library supports them, rather than during rendering. 7. Best practices for DOM manipulation with refs. Refs are best thought of as escape hatches. Most of the time you do not need to reach into the DOM directly. Your component should express its UI declaratively and let the library manage updates. Use refs when you must reach outside that model, for example to set focus, scroll to a position, measure dimensions, or integrate with external APIs that require a DOM node. Avoid using refs to do destructive manipulations, such as removing or inserting children of nodes managed by the library, because doing so can interfere with the library's rendering logic and lead to bugs or inconsistencies. 8. Recap. In summary, refs are a mechanism to hold onto a DOM element that the UI library has rendered. You attach a ref to an element, you wait until after the commit phase to access it, and you use it for non-destructive operations like focusing, scrolling, or measuring. Be cautious about relying on refs for heavy DOM modifications. Always prefer the declarative approach when possible. Use refs as a tool for edge cases rather than the default path.